So, I want to finish the track of evolution that I was talking to you about this morning. So it's revolution, involution. We spent a little time in narcissism. And we're going to spend a little bit more time in narcissism as we go into power. But from there, you proceed to the next stage, which is revelation, which is the next stage of that journey of empowerment, the revelatory stage. This stage, Hannah, do you need something here? Which is that stage of an appetite starts in you. That kind of appetite to know yourself at a level that is greater than how others, the information you can get from or through ordinary channels. Revealed knowledge about yourself. Now, I want to talk about that for a little bit, and then we're going to go into it deeper, but what is revealed knowledge about yourself? And what is that? This falls into the category of mystical knowledge about yourself. So, in the level of revolution, when you're at the revolution stage in the physical part of your life, and you say to somebody, I've had enough of this. As a rule, most people you are revolting in your revolution know what you're talking about. Because it's not revealed knowledge you're revolting against. It's something in the physical restriction of power. So we're going to go to a word that is solid throughout this whole thing. Our anchor word is power. The revolutionary power. All right, stay focused. So that first level of power in the revolution for you is very physical. The next step, when you get to that level of involution and you begin to ask yourself about what is it that I do want, you are going within and you are asking yourself about an interior language of power that could be brand new for you. What kind of power am I allowing myself to access? This is such a big deal right here, so I need to hit a pause button. You are actually, when you are going in your involution journey, you are asking yourself, what am I capable of perceiving? What am I actually capable of understanding? How high do I want? How much do I want to? How much? How big do I want to define my universe beyond science? How big is neuroscience? How big is? What is the human? How would the human brain function if I realized part of it was actually wired into timelessness, which it is? What if I could access that? What if I could? What if I could understand that part of the schizophrenic was a portal to simultaneous lifetimes that has been opened up? That autism is in fact an energetic disorder from too much energy coming in, and I'll explain that to you. too much vertical consciousness imbalanced with horizontal. This is hour by hour time, and this is timelessness. And every one of us now is somewhere on that spectrum, making our way from being hour by hour chronos time to what we can understand in terms of timelessness. What we get like this intuitive time. I got it. Revelation, the fourth stage. What is revealed to us in timelessness, revealed knowledge, versus knowledge we acquire hour by hour by hour through school, through experience. This is revelation. This is how the mystics would say, Teresa of Avila described in her sixth mansion. She said, these are the mystical experiences. This is a mystical experience. This is. And one of the ways God talks to you is through revealed knowledge, where you go from not knowing to knowing in an instant. This is mystical. It's not logical, it's not reasonable. It bypasses the slow mechanism of the brain and goes directly to soul intelligence, where you go from not knowing to full knowing. Now, there's so much to say about every single thing that I'm saying that I start popping. To this, I want to just hit a pause button here and jump into mystical experiences that have something in common here when an experience of high revelation happens. And that's that it is commonly associated with a burst of light, a blast of light, going all the way back to Saul of Tarsus being blasted off his horse on the way to Damascus, blinded by the light. Always blinded by the light. When a truth comes in, it comes in the form of a light. When it comes into your body, it comes in the form of a light that translates biochemically oftentimes to, I felt this rush, this charge, this electrical charge that you sometimes will feel going through, and how many times people will say, my equipment busts, my this, my that, these high electrical charges that are coming in from the vertical reality. But when a genuine act of holy revelation happens, when you're given that kind of truth that you didn't know before, that comes in, it often can just burst in as light, and it can have a blinding moment. In my case, it caused grand mal seizures, and they're called the mystic's disorder, out cold, in the entry of Teresa of Avila. And then it stopped. The wiring had to be redone. And then all was well again. Okay, now, it kind of wires you for a different speed at which data begins to come in. Right? Revelation. It's revelatory holy data is always about transformational truth. It's not information about how to make money. Okay, let's be really clear here. It's always revelational about how to understand something more fully on behalf of life, on behalf of. It's always about something that will heal or take humanity one step further, or deepen an understanding about why this suffering has to be and how to endure. Revelatory about yourself. It will never address questions rooted in vanity. I urge you to understand that. Vanity comes here. It will never help you satisfy questions that come from the need to address wounds-based injustice. I need personal justice. When you see yourself as the center of your universe, because no one else does. There is no God that's positioned you as the center of the universe. I beg you to understand that. That this is a humble pill, but the motto you want to carry in your heart is humble up. This is not your universe. This is not your world. Nobody was born here to serve you. Nobody's life here is based on making your life better or easier. Make no mistake about that. Everybody's life is their journey. And for how we can help their life find how they can help us. We are woven together in that way, and sometimes we're woven together for a lifetime. Sometimes we're woven together as parent and child, husband and wife, best friends. Sometimes we're woven together and we can have an impact in someone's life more in 10 minutes than knowing people for 10 days or 10 hours or 10 years. Mystical timing is intense versus you can know some people 20 years and they don't have the impact as a vertical relationship where you come together and the soul touches and you never forget that moment with that person. That's a mystical moment with that person. The mystical revelation about you. Who am I, Lord? What am I here for? And what starts bubbling in you will first take you away from the world you're in some way. Something will start shutting down before something opens up. Something will start shutting down before something opens up. It is always that way. One of the hands of God is that you're not an exception. So that the path you're on, even as a baby mystic, is a path other mystics have walked before. And there is such comfort and wonder in that, oh look, this is classic to John of the Cross, two Eastern mystics, two avatars from the East, from the West, from the Christian tradition, from the Buddhist tradition. For what reason have you given me life? Up comes the soul, and first I must shut down the life of the ego. And so we begin with the revelation of you, and it is not done by letter or by communication or let me make this easy on you. First, you have to go through the release of that which you think you deserve, which you think you're entitled to. All the things you think this life owes you. And this can be a long battle for people. This is what you really surrender. Surrender is not giving up because you are on the floor and you think, I can't fight anymore. It's finally giving up. The fight between you and God. You will never get your way this way. But you'll always find a way if you ask. You've got to understand the nature of the divine. It's never the way your mind wants it, which is, where's the door, where's the keys, where's the pension plan, where's the guarantee? This is not how heaven is not a human being. It's not a legal system. It's a miraculous system, which means you'll oftentimes find yourself with your back against the wall. Like, this is a hell of a fix. Whether or not we go hungry, whether or not things go this way, is of no consequence. This is what you don't get. On the other hand, whether or not you need to cross a river with no bridge doesn't matter to heaven. It'll get you across. Oh, look, there's a frozen part. Where did this come from? Who knows? Just walk. How could that happen? It happens. Heaven plays by heaven's rules. And what happens when revelation begins is that you start to have to trust very different rules, which is, whose rules do you trust? The one that bends nature or the one that follows nature? Do you trust this inner world? Do you trust the outer world? And to this, I have to tell you, I'm just gonna do this. You know, I used to be so organized in my head, and now I apologize. My head is more like a hologram, and when I think of an idea, 1,000 books rush into me, and all kinds of things start downloading, and I never used to be that way. I used to be just an organized Chronos kind of teacher, and I'm not anymore. Deal with it. Okay. After I started to, finally cave and give into the beginning to organize the prayer book and the whole Teresa experience and all how that changed my life, which meant that I would probably end up teaching spirituality and spiritual direction and all of this. And much to my surprise, doing everything I didn't want to do has made me happier than everything else I thought I wanted to do. Go figure. And like I said to David, I did this retreat, the online retreat. Some of you had took it. Nothing made me happier than doing that. I was only going to get up in the morning and do like a 10-minute message, and I got so carried away. But I loved every morning of talking to you guys and putting together my message every morning. And I just got carried away. It was like, I did it for me. And I was following the retreat. I did the retreat with you. I fasted. I did every single thing. I was enamored. I didn't want it to end. So doing all of this. But 1.5 years ago, and this is what I want to share with you, because I think it was very important to me, and it has changed my inner world yet again. I had to teach a class on Pythagoras. And this is so typical of heaven. Okay, you could not pick a worse person to do anything with numbers than me, and I can tell you that for a fact. There is not. And this is the truth. I don't balance a checkbook. How I balance a checkbook, and Janet knows, and Beth, is that I round it up to the highest number. Every single check I write, there's no such thing as a cent in my checkbook. It's all rounded to the next highest number, and sometimes I'll go up $2 or $3 if I'm feeling generous. And I do that because, first of all, it's easier for me to add. But I also do that because then I get a bonus. And I never fall short. And for someone like me who doesn't add or can't do it, this is the way. And then every quarter or at the end of the year, I find that I have $4,000 or $5,000 in my checking account, which then goes into my Cush fund. Now tell me that's not genius. Tell me that's not. Anyone want to argue with that? Okay, I think it's genius. So this goes on and on. So the point is, when they asked me to do a class on Pythagoras, I thought, you can't be serious. But they were, and so I did. And this was in the school in Chartres, where it is a school of mysticism that I teach with every summer in France. So I poured myself into Pythagoras. And I discovered what I realized happened. Now I have to kind of mime this out. Is that when Teresa happened to me, I felt that I realized once I got to Pythagoras, as I looked back at Teresa, who's in the 1500s, and now with Pythagoras, I am in BC. I looked at Teresa and realized that I'd been on a long journey of unlearning everything that I had learned. I'd been on an unlearning. Okay? So when I was with Teresa, and that would be Ignatius of Loyola, John of the Cross, Teresa, because they were all together in Spain in the 1500s. Can you imagine? Wow, huh? So they were pre-Age of Reason. They were just at the foothold of when we would begin to consider ourselves the reasoning species. We were just about to enter the Renaissance, the reasoning time. Now, you have to get this. The Age of Reason has formed you with the threads of Plato and Aristotle. So Plato's got one side of you and Aristotle has the other. Plato has given you this sense that beauty and virtue is of substance to your soul and your heart. So you swarm when you see beauty and sunsets and virtue. But Aristotle captured your whole sense that life should be reasonable, that you should be able to reason with everything. That in fact, ultimately, we would take that thread of Aristotle, wouldn't we? And Aquinas would get it a few centuries later and decide that God maybe could be reasoned with. And we would take that thread and create this off-planet notion that would eventually become this God of reason, so that we would speak this way. There must be a reason. There must be a reason. There must be a reason for why all things happen as they do in my life, as they do. Why am I bringing this up? Because your whole sense of being tormented and suffering is because you can't figure out reasons for why the life you think you should have had, could have had, or would have had hasn't come to pass. Or why my dear friend Norm Shealy, my beloved friend Norm Shealy, told me from the time I met him when I was 31, I am 65. I've known him more than half my life. He told me from the beginning when I met him that he and his wife had in mind, and believe me, they meant it, that they would live together into their 100s, past their 100s. And to accommodate that, they chose the perfect place to have their farm. They were only organic, from their chickens to their eggs to their food, which they put up because they grew it themselves, to their dill, to their herbs, to their this, to their that, to their everything, to their beefalo, to their this, to their every single thing on their farm. And she died. He texts me from the office. How can this be? It wasn't planned. By him. By him. The Renaissance mind. In you is a Plato Renaissance mind. A fictitious wheel. A mechanical wheel that was put there by Plato. Thank you very much. Okay, now you hold on to that because we're going to visit Plato in a moment. But you have to appreciate what put everything in your mind that's there. What are the things, the substance, the thought forms, the ideas, the windows that make you see the world as you do? And one of them is Plato. One is Aristotle. And you never even thought about that. That part of the whole way you see is still these two great philosophers from the mystery schools of Greece. So now, I'm in Spain. And I'm standing there in Spain and I'm looking at the Renaissance yet to happen. And I'm thinking, what's the difference between the Renaissance mind and the mind of the mystics that I'm standing in Spain? Before they were to experience turning into these reasoning creatures, right before Galileo and Copernicus would say, you know what I think? I think the earth goes around the sun. I think this is an orderly and logical universe. We'll burn him. Well, never mind that. Let's just take his papers and hide him in the Vatican. But they discover maybe God is an orderly universe. The age of science and reason is born. But they had yet to see it that way. It wasn't reasonable yet. It was still mystical. It was still mystical. So for John and Ignatius and for Teresa, it was still a world where they could sit in their office and say this: I was visited by an angel today, but I'm not sure from what realm because it didn't stay long enough. And she didn't add, I'm going mad. Because, and this is important, it was totally acceptable. It was not normal, but it was acceptable. There was no sense of madness. This was something that could happen. It was allowed within the parameters of reality. And this is, we hadn't yet squeezed reality into a smaller parameter that said, sorry, the only things that could happen are the things we could touch, not the things we could sense. We hadn't yet cut out those senses. That, come over here. In the 21st century, we're now trying to open those senses again. See, that's what's happening now. These very senses that were so wide open then, rusty, and we're trying to open now, that were wide open then. And now as we open them here, there are more doors to open that they did not have but theirs. Because the world we're opening them up to is galactic, is cosmic, is partnering with quantum physics, is a hologram. We are blasting into something else where our sense of power is connected now to our spiritual intuition, our physical intuition, our emotional intuition. We are becoming a different species. We're actually morphing, which is also why the way we have to treat ourselves medically, emotionally, physically, the way we will understand our spiritual anatomy system, our psychic anatomy system, our physical, our collective anatomy system hasn't even been charted yet, but it will. And our archetypal anatomy system. Okay, come over here. Back here in the 15th century, what I recognized is, they're so open about the types of communication that we shut down. And then as I went back, I visited Francis of Assisi as I poured myself into his work, which was animal consciousness, earth consciousness. He was very much a pantheist, very much one who was ever with nature. The trees spoke to him, the animals spoke. He was, in fact, a spiritual environmentalist, animal soul. This is where he lived. It was wide open. As I went further and further back into the Old Testament, and I stood in the Old Testament, when I started to read those scriptures all over again, which I adore, adore, adore. It's my favorite, favorite, favorite. I got into the book of Job, which is my ultimate favorite. And there, well, I'm going to go to the Old Testament, actually the first 5 books of creation. And you know, in those stories where they talk about Moses and Noah and all these visitations and Abram, and he says, well, there's a couple of angels here, go feed them. Which meant they were physical. And then when the Israelites had to fight the Canaanites, Yahweh sent 120,000 angels, suited up for battle. Now, I thought, if you read those stories, you think, what a fun tale. I'm wondering now if it was true. And I'll tell you why, if it's actually the way it happened. We are returning to vertical time. We are opening up again to a very interesting relationship with energy and matter. A totally different relationship to energy and matter. Which means the way we will engage with matter and that world is becoming very porous again. Very porous. If we go back through the centuries, the further back we go, the more porous it was. When you get back to the time of Jesus, you get back to the time of Buddha, they were very clearly engaging in light. And the angelic kingdom during with Jesus, he was always seeing light beings. The prophets came to him as light, the angels came to him as light, the angels came to Mary. They were always reporting, but if you go to the Old Testament, they were matter still. So the great difference between Jesus in the Old Testament and the New was he did the conversion so that light became matter. And we're in the era where matter is returning to the laws of light. Right? This is really a great big huge thing to get what I'm saying to you. It's huge. So that the technology of the soul that he taught, we densified at that time, both with Buddha and Jesus, so that we could experience how powerful the soul was in form. His ultimate act was, I'll show you how powerful, I'm going to take my form out of the dead. Oh, all right, here, where am I? Can you get me now? Wait, I'm just going to hook it on my bra. Wait. Got it. So the ultimate was when he said, I'm going to pull my form out of the grave. So you get that your soul in full force. There isn't any form of matter. Nothing that is subject to, that cannot be controlled by the power of your life force. It was the ultimate act. Now, I'm not saying this as a Christian at all. I am saying this as a technician, as the holy act of technician of the soul. Are you following this? Because this is a great, big, huge, big deal. Okay? That the ultimate act of showing the full magnet of the soul is that nothing has dominion over it, not even death. So it wasn't just about him. It was a template of the power of soul itself. Did you get it that way?
Yeah.
So in a sense, that what he had to do that, to say, here's the ultimate power of the human design. Just like Buddha in his full of light, was full of enlightenment, and he said, don't you go turning me into a god. I'm just under the Bodhi tree glowing. Okay, yeah, so, well, he didn't say glowing, but more or less radiating kind of thing. Okay, so, with Pythagoras, now I tell you a story. Yet another story. Can you handle one more story?
Yeah.
You want to stretch before I go to the story? Okay, good. Arborist. Once upon a time, there was a man named Arborist. Now, here's my point.
Please spell that.
Arborist. A-R. Arbor. U-R. Arbor-I-S. Now, Arborist. Now, here's the thing. Arborist is from this era, 1,500 years before Jesus. What, did he actually exist? I think it's entirely possible. I think it's entirely possible. For what is myth but the story of trying to explain how this power works? And here's the thing. We're now in the era, come back, before Christianity. And this is important to get. Once Jesus incarnated, the power rules shifted to Earth School. These power rules incarnated into our body. They incarnated. They literally incarnated. So we had to play by very different rules. Prior to that, in this era, it was an era where people were learning the laws, but they didn't have to live by them in the same intimate way. So this is an important difference. This is the era of Pythagoras, of the Ten Commandments, of Plato, of Aristotle. As if these people lived at a time before doubt was created, and they were just saying, give me the rules of power. Give me the rules of power. How was this constructed? So if you can imagine human beings having dialogues like that, that's what was happening. So, Arborist. Once upon a time, there's a man, and he lives there's a tribe that lives in Mongolia. And they were the tribe of the arrows. And they were a warrior people, and they made these arrows. And these arrows were so extraordinary that these arrow makers knew how to make arrows that could make any sound they wanted. So they communicated at a distance with their arrows. They called for help, or they called for dinner. They shot an arrow by the music it made. And when they would go to war, they would warn their aggressive enemy about how powerful they were by the sound of their arrows. So they would shoot these arrows with this horrific sound first, and mostly their opposing forces turned and went home. Now, it was said that the man who had the golden arrow was the most powerful among them, because this man mastered the powers of everything, so that instead of sending an arrow to do his bidding, he rode the arrow. And this arrow would take him anywhere he wanted to go. through any difficulty he ever had, through the mountains, through any place. And one day, a man with a golden arrow showed up. And so this man took his arrow and he traveled from Mongolia looking for one person, one special person. And he traveled until he came to this place where he found this one person, and that one person was Pythagoras. And he gave Pythagoras this golden arrow and said, you are the one. And with this arrow, Pythagoras pierced the universe and brought back the knowledge of mathematics, the knowledge of music, the knowledge of the music of the spheres, for that's how high and far his soul had to travel. For they believed Pythagoras was in fact sent by and schooled by Zeus. Now when I studied Pythagoras, I flew out of my body. It was the first time I gave a lecture where I got so heated I almost had to take my clothes off. So I'm going to share something with you. When I got to Pythagoras, his relationship with numbers is archetypal. And it was then that I saw the mathematics of our body, that even our body was a mathematical calculation. His numbers from 1 to 10 was a mathematical calculation. Now you're going to see this in numerology, but it doesn't ever apply to the cell tissue. It doesn't apply to the dynamics of the body. For Pythagoras, number 1 was the number of whole, to be whole. It was the number of 1. The universe was an understanding what whole is, what it means to be a number 1, what it means to be able to comprehend anything you look at as a whole, what it is to be able to comprehend whole consciousness, the power of that. So it's not number 1 for him, it is whole for him. And it is the capacity of your soul to hold whole in your soul and actually use it, not as a number, but as a consciousness. It almost blew me away when I got that. It's not a number, it's a consciousness. And that whole, to look at something and recognize it's a loose fragment, where does it belong? To spot something in yourself that is a fragment thought that on its own causes you trouble. That this fragment, this is going to get me in trouble. It's a piece of shrapnel in my head. To have a conversation with someone and think, this conversation is going to shatter my wholeness. I can't allow it. You're putting doubt into my wholeness. Your wholeness is your immune system. Your immune system. Your number 1 is your immune system. 1 is the size of each one of your cells. Your cells are a 1. Oh my God, this is just number 1 and I could go on forever and ever and ever. Just on 1. Just on 1. Just on 1. The mathematics of 1. 2 is division. He said to be able to handle 2, which is polarity. The number 2 is the first time you're going to encounter the other. Perhaps it's the opposite. Perhaps it's the aggressor. Perhaps it's the beloved. Perhaps it's the friend. Perhaps it's the foe. Perhaps it's the mystery. What is the other? And what will number 2 do? 2 ovaries, 2 testicles, 2 in the second part, 2 sides of your body, two in this part. The mathematics of duality, dual thought. Do you live in opposites? Do you have to live in opposites where you are right and you are wrong? I have to win, you have to lose. To live in duality will keep you here. It will keep you always reaching for weapons. If I do not win, I will destroy you. It is the lowest form of consciousness. It will make you an addict. When you are in duality consciousness, you will always, always, always be an addict, and there's no exception. There'll never be an exception to this. Excuse me. Excuse me. This is just the beginning of the number 2. Just the beginning. How can you understand your power if this neutral position of recognizing the moment you are with something that is outside yourself, if your soul is not able to handle that other, no matter what it is, substance, person, challenge, word, toffee, doesn't matter, it's the other. And my soul will be tested. Tone of voice. I know people who say, you can't talk to me in that tone of voice. A tone. They lose it over a tone. They lose it over, they have no capacity to control themselves. None. They have a rule book. You can't speak to me in that tone, can't use those words, da-da-da. They should have a rule book right here are the rules in order to get along with me. Here are the rules in order to get along. Give them your rule book and get it over with. These are my boundaries, these are my needs, these are my da-da-da-da-da. Go away. You're too much trouble. You're too much trouble. Get out. This is the number 2. That's just the number 2. The psychic field of you and opposite. And the pressure that puts on everything in your body that operates on duality. Are you with me here? And how it divides the cell. Participates in cell division. Because the force of that, how the pressure, say this right, say it right, Carol. I need to communicate this. The stress you are under in the consciousness of duality participates in cell division. Influences cell division. Influences the place, puts toxicity into the natural process of cell division. Did I say that so you get it? Okay. The body naturally cell divides and reproduces. If I am always in number 2 stress, if my consciousness is always strategizing about winning, losing, beating, destroying, getting this, that, always trying to calculate this, that is the stress that's going to be participating in cell division. Do you understand now? It will always be stressful, stressful, stressful. Okay, I need to give you a break. I need to give you a break. Just a little break, not much, just a little. Take a 15-minute breather. Okay, all right, are you with me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll finish with number 3 with Pythagoras. So you have a sense, and what I love about this, though I didn't intend to go here, but isn't it fun? You never know with me. Is that the more impersonal you achieve that sense of impersonal, that sense that there is knowledge in everything, There's knowledge in everything. And that every single encounter you have is blessed and worth it. So one of the living creeds that you carry with you, another jewel, is that God does not waste a moment of your life, no matter what you say. No matter what you say. No matter how you perceive it. That if you, the fact that you may be bored, poor you, or you may not like where you are, oh, isn't that a shame? It's up to you to gird your loins and shape up. Heaven's not going to come and say, oh my God, what have I done? Hey, baby unhappy. It's little baby unhappy. Heaven will do everything make you happy. That's not the way this game works down here. Most people would probably do something to adjust their lives. Most people would say, would you mind bringing my child back? I know my mother would. Would you mind reshuffling the deck here a little bit? That's not how it works. We have to just put our big people pants on and one day decide, I will not fight this idea that I'm not in the life that I want. I must take this and say, this is the life that I have, and trust the truth. All things change in the blink of an eye. Trust Buddha, the teachings of Buddha. All things change in the blink of an eye. They change in the blink of an eye. Today it looks like you have nothing. Tomorrow, oh my Lord, you have everything, and you didn't realize you were on that road. Who knew? Who knew? Today it looks like no one was on the road, and tomorrow, oh my Lord, I have 1,000 people, all of whom are asking me to stay. You don't know. Your journey is to say, I don't know, but today this is the street I find myself, so this is the street I will bless when I wake in prayer and walk. But I will not condemn my own life. Number 3. And by the way, that is also number 2, you and your life. You and your life, which is the other. So you step fully into your life. And what is number 3? 3 is a triangle. We could spend the year on number 3. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Thesis, an idea. Okay, this is, and number 2, if I stay on number 2, what happens? Do you ever meet curmudgeons? For every idea? No, I don't think so. My aunt could be such a curmudgeon. If I told her every day of the week ended in Y, she'd say, I'm not sure. Okay? Curmudgeon. Thesis, antithesis. So, Pythagoras said the power of 3 is that you come in the middle. Synthesize. Synthesize. You take the best of both and you find the middle way. What is the teaching of Buddha? The middle way. Now, this is so exciting because this is also your solar what I did in this great class is I took his numbers and I put them into the chakras. And the workings of our biospiritual biology exploded in numerology, in Pythagorean numerology. Because the duality of every part of your body here, ovaries, testicles, the two sides. It was obviously a deuce. And then number 3, to understand your solar plexus, your identity, your sense of self-esteem is rooted in triangular consciousness. Your capacity to transcend duality and rise into the thesis of my capacity to synthesize opposites. That the heart of self-esteem, the heart of real power is my capacity to not engage in duality, to not see that, define my sense of power as my capacity to have more than the other, bigger than the other, to define myself by the other. What does the other think of me? But rather, the synthesis of recognizing, that other probably is as frightened of me as I am of him. Just as insecure as I am. Just as fragile as me. So the middle ground would be compassion. The compassionate way, said Buddha. Number 3, the way of compassion. The way of listening. What is the third grace? The grace of understanding. God, grant me the grace to understand what that person is saying to me. Instead of how the ego does it, which is, you better understand me. But the soul would say, grant me the grace to use everything I've got so I can help this person express what they're trying to say, so I can understand them. The middle way, the number 3, the breaking of that idea of winner and loser. The idea that maybe, Hannah, there is a point that is the mystery of the unknown. That the triangle can go up or go this way. That there is a point of power and you don't know which way it comes from in a triangle. But there's always the mysterious other. But it's perfectly balanced. It is one of the forms that's perfectly balanced. It's the Trinity. The number 3. And so when you think that here's something to really grapple with, when you are in a position where you feel like I'm losing power, and you all know what that feels like. Could be in a problem, an issue, something that's causing you to use a memory. Who knows? Any of the many crazy ways we lose power. Put it in the number 3. What are the 3 things? Problem, solution, resolution, however,
Problem, reaction, solution.
Precisely. Problem, reaction, solution. Absolutely. Dynamic it here and say, I'm losing power. And even and use the number 3 as a way of saying, if it's duality, it's because I feel like there is an opposition. It's opposing me in some way because I feel I'm holding a point, a position that is unyielding. I am not yielding. In the number 3, I have to yield something. I have to compromise. I have to compromise my position to get out. What do I have to compromise? What have they brought into my life that I need to see? Because if I see it through the number 3, it also means that there's something about this situation that has come to teach me, expand something, modify my thinking in some way. If you stay in the number 2, you'll see that person is oppositional. And it's all about attack, win, defeat, destroy. But the number 3 is that pivotal position that is about, I need to modify this because there's something in this that is meant to reshape me in some way. And get out of even using the language of right or wrong. This is a reshaping instrument, this situation. Does that help you here? Okay. And one of the one of the reasons I loved this so much is because, once again, numbers are universal, and every single everything, everywhere, everything contains mathematics. You can't find anything anywhere at all that is not mathematics. Everything is mathematical. You can't create anything without math. You can't do anything without math. Everything is mathematics. Absolutely everything. It is a language and expression of God. Meaning that God speaks in these numbers. God speaks in form and function. Form and function, order, systems. Which also means that when we fall out of system, there's a system to course correct. There's a system to course correct, which is why when our body falls out of system, it engages in course correcting. If you eat something you shouldn't, your body will throw it out. So it's built to course correct. Okay, nature's built to course correct. And if you participate in stress and hemorrhage power, your life will course correct. Because your soul does the very same thing. And you participate in choices or in dynamics that are not appropriate for you, your system will course correct. It will shut down areas of your life. It will shut you down. It will put you in, it will engage a dark night. And this is all about retrieving so that you kind of reboot in order to release one part of your life and reboot and start the next. There's nothing about your life that's meant to harm you or punish you, that kind of nonsense. That's not how the universe works. It's always about rebalancing and rebooting. Always, always, always. Nothing about life is about taking away life. Okay? Okay. Do you have any questions so far before? What? Just 10,000? Is that what you're thinking? Well, good. Well, no, it's a time for questions before I continue on. I'd like to just pause and. It's late in the day before I continue with anything heavy duty.
I have a question about the fragility, and we keep going back to the fragility of our mental state right now and how we get all flustered with a comment. And I was wondering where that fragility came from and why now? Why are we so fragile?
Okay, so in this opening of us and the world behind our eye, that really brought the archetypal world forward in a way that it wasn't with Carl Jung. And the first person to use the word archetypes was Plato. Okay, so it's not, you know, so this world of, you know, way back when the rules of how this world was structured was being revealed, they saw it. It was like God said, look, this is how it is. It's mathematical, it's this, it's that. There's archetypal patterns. They got the rules. They got the rules. And so it just got hidden in the stories of God and men and all this blah blah blah. But now when we entered the nuclear age, this shifted everything, and it just kind of blew us into this era where one way to really get the seriousness of what I'm talking about. Wait, my hearing's been damaged a little bit by this this illness that I developed, this like odd flu. So I keep having to blow that because it's like my hearing goes into this way you get when your plane is landing, and so it goes from this to I begin to lose my capacity to hear. So excuse me if I have to do that. The two wheels that have always been the kind of turning wheels that have governed us since time began, instinctually in our primal gut, have been the instinct to create and the instinct to survive. No matter what happened, we can create something to survive this. It's cold, we'll find fire. It's this, that. We've just the instinct. Bronze, we'll try this, we'll try that. We'll make weapons out of this. We'll just always. The thing about entering the nuclear age is we finally created a means of destruction that we can't survive. We finally did it. We finally. Okay, is that better? Is that better? We finally morphed ourselves. We finally forced, in order to survive, an evolutionary leap in our own design. We, in order to survive what we are now creating, we have to change. The only way is not that we create something new, but that we recreate ourselves. And so it's like the light sparked in the 60s, the late 50s, and the elements in the society that had to fall away began to fall away so that we could become inspired by this idea that there was something in us that was worth exploring, that inner space and outer space were the two new frontiers. What's in the one is in the whole, the micro and the macro. So inner space and outer space, pioneering both, were born at the same time. And they might well look like each other for all I know. But the idea that an age of Aquarius, an age of something, an age of something that could break through boundaries that parametered us, was born along with a thought form that is mystically true not literally, but mystically true, that downloaded into the collective, that catapulted us into a different lifestyle, which was we create our own reality. Well, who the heck what? What do you mean we create our own? We're not doing a very good job at it. But somehow that idea took root. It took root in us. And from the 60s on, it caused people to just break through barriers. It did its job. It said, that's it. I can believe in what I want. I can go to the east and go to ashrams. I can go to the west and do this. I can be with whomever. I can sexually explore. All the boundaries that had to come down came down. All the limitations that prevented us from what? From beginning to explore becoming whole. The beginning of holism. Now all of those were like baby steps, were baby things. They were just the necessary paperwork. They weren't the real thing. They were never the real thing. They were just the paperwork. There's nothing about exploring any kind of relationship you want that has anything to do with making you whole in the actual hard work of it. But it was the first step, the baby step, of beginning to move down a ferocious, rigorous path of biological, spiritual, psychic, intellectual, soul, rigorous transformation of our species. We are a predatorial killer species that still put most of our money and creativity in killing each other. Killing each other. From the time the sun goes down, you lock your doors because you don't trust your fellow species and don't think that you do. We are a killer species, and it takes this much for any one of you to bring out the violence in every single one of you. You'll sue anybody at the drop of a hat. Lawsuits abound in commercials, and you think nothing of it. Nothing. And this is who we've become. We are litigious, brutal, vengeful. And we never, ever, and we have to pay people to do endless healing because we can't even comprehend that we call ourselves Christian and we are hateful. Hateful. We believe the crap those Republicans have been generating about being invaded by these people. What kind of terrorists and invaders apply to come into a country? You believe these scientists who say that this universe they know nothing about began with a bomb, that even God uses a bomb called the Big Bang. They're idiots. Okay. Now, where was I?
Fragility.
The fragility. Now, in keeping with all of that, our unconscious comes out, and now the archetypal patterns, because it's a new level of this is how you work, guys. You're attached to patterns. You're attached to patterns. You are not all personality, and you think you're attached to patterns. Now, how are those patterns going to wake up? How are we going to get that? Well, hello, Hollywood. Bam! So for the first time, we have a generation growing up with television. And there, all these kids come home in the 50s, turn on the tube, and see for the first time The Magical Child, Mary Poppins, My Three Sons, Donna Reed, all these silly little stories about perfect families, and they think, I want a nanny that comes in through the chimney. I want one of those. I want one of those. And they think this begins to model the archetype of the magical child. I'm convinced so many people think they were neglected and unloved because they grew up with the image of a magical child and didn't receive the love they saw on television. I just wasn't loved enough. I didn't have a Walt Disney childhood because the first time that archetype was let loose, the Tarzan child, the this child, the this, I didn't get enough love. They just didn't do all of that for me. I wasn't at Disney World. I didn't have all this and all that and all this. They just came home and tried to put food on the table. They were exhausted. Now, there were kids that had really bad childhoods, kid not. And that woke up the victim. So we had the victim, the child, the saboteur, the rescuer, the healer. We started to have archetypes drop in and say, well, hello. Hello, that's me. And started to come forward. But the victim really, really, really hooked in. Because in a society that has little compassion, if any, for the victim, at all, and that's the American society, it likes its victims in floods where they could send boxes of stuff and then pull yourself together. So, the victim really took off. And to me, the apex of it is where you have lawsuits saying, these kids were too indulged to be held responsible for crimes. We have really gone over the deep end. But we really took the victim and gave it such a voice that we can claim victim for anything. Your tone of voice is victimizing me. This is victimized. Tone of voice is victimizing? Are you serious? You that fragile? That a tone of voice victimized you? Wow.
Thank you.
Wow. I'm sending you to the battlefield, baby. I want you on my team if a tone of voice can bring you down. So, that's what I'm saying. Look at this. What do you think? That tone of voice is out of question. You have to look at yourself. And you have to think, wait a minute here. What are the rules that I've given myself about how I want to play in this life? What have I decided is, where do I get off with telling people? And furthermore, how many people care that much about you? You better be careful with these rules you got. Because a few too many rules and it's goodbye. Nobody cares about your rules. What we can all expect is, I really would not like to be kicked, stepped on, etc., etc. But beyond that, I don't expect everybody in this world to get up and when I walk in a room. Humble up here, yeah.
Okay, so
Wait a minute.
talking about victims, if I know that I'm stuck in narcissist,
Yeah.
how do I move to revelation?
Well, you got to change your rules. You have got to change your rules. We'll get to that tomorrow and break it into pieces, because it's not that simple without me kind of going through it for you. But it really does come down to all of us changing the rules by which we live our life. And when you what have I done? And when we change the rules, it comes down to us all changing our rules. Pardon me for repeating, but when we decide I have to change the rules, there's nothing easy about that. Because remember, the narcissist has a good life.
It's always happy. Right?
The narcissist and nobody else likes your narcissist. Make no mistake about it. Nobody. Everybody will be glad to see your narcissist go. Except you. Because it gives you power, except it's not the kind of power you want. And you don't get it. You think it is. Because so far it's the kind of power that lets you kick in doors and bitch and this and that. But when you got to realize nobody cares about that. And I want you to imagine your funeral. I really do. When you go after class today, you're going to go back and you're going to imagine your funeral. That's your homework tonight. And how many people are really going to show up at your funeral? Because you were a narcissist. And they're going to think, thank God. Because they're sick of your complaining. And in fact, if you weren't, if you were done with your narcissist and got in to being the most generous person you can, not complaining, if you really thought about what are you complaining about, and looked at who's worth loving, who's worth what if you weren't complaining, would you be loving? What you got to just look at the power you have to change you, to change you, to change your life. It's so gargantuan. It's so gargantuan. We've got 2 more days to work on changing your life. And in fact, if you understood, you only would need a second for liftoff. Just a second. It's not about money. It's not about education. It's about you getting the power of you to realize, why am I thinking that way? That's just a thought form. Get out of it. It's just a thought form. Okay? And if you finally get out of something that's narcissistic and think, I've been holding on to this because it allows me to do what? To punish others, to control others, to this. I got to let go of this, to feel sorry for myself, to this. Now, how did we get so fragile? Because we've indulged wounds. We think we've decided wounds are power. That we're the only ones who are wounded. That other people before us have never ever been wounded. Not like us, not like us. Why we need support groups for our wounds and social lives for our wounds. Really, you know. And we need all this stuff for our wounds. They need designer groups. Our wounds require designer groups. What do you think a support group is? And designer hospitals and all kinds of things for our wounds. That's how fragile we are. Designer drugs. What?
No different than illness. Illness has a lot of power too.
I have a thought because following racial equality activists on social media right now, I'm seeing how many white women protect themselves from taking racial responsibility by their fragility. Like,
What does that mean?
Okay.
Really, what does that mean? I don't know what that means.
So there's
Can you hear me? Yeah.
a tendency for white women to say, I don't.
What
just,
white women? What white women?
I would say just all tend to be all white women. So, for example, there's what I'm reading about is how many black women will try to say, here is how your actions are racist unintentionally, but your actions are racist. And white women will say back to black people, don't talk to me that way, like I'm not going to hear it unless you use a certain tone of voice, and it's called tone policing. And so
Okay.
so I'm seeing how like there's fragility that keeps racism in place as
That's
well.
right. That's right. That's right.
So that was an interesting.
That's one of the social elephants in the room.
In terms of the lack of people of color in here.
In terms of discussing any race wounds is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I hear that. That's why I'm trying to educate myself around it, so I know how to talk about it, and so I can be aware of the unconscious mechanisms that are keeping racism in place.
It is you know what? It's what always keeps a wound in place is the lack of acknowledgement of where the wound came from. That's number one. And the power the wound has given both sides. Let's use number 3. The power the wound has given both sides. And there has to be an acknowledgement of that. A genuine acknowledgement that it has empowered and disempowered both sides. And both sides have indulged in the power and disempowerment of both sides. And it's very complex because it goes all the way back to the violation of kidnapping people. It goes all the way back to, but the whole history of the world is a history of people taking land that doesn't belong to them and whatever, so we can't even go there. But when there is a healing, reduce it to what does it take? It takes Lynn and I looking at where a violation is and also how we use that violation to our advantage. We have to acknowledge that. I have to acknowledge you did violate me, but then I turned it into a power. That's called wound power. And she has to acknowledge she did that, so that we get out of the blame. We got to transcend the blame and then look at, well, this is how I actually benefited from what you did. It was a bad benefit. It was not a good benefit. But once you make it full circle and say, we both did it. We both did a negative thing from this and we used it. And now we can rest the slave master archetype. And how both sides have continued to feed mastery in their own culture, enslavement in their culture. And they have to, now it's up to both sides to break within their cultures that archetypal pattern of indulging the master and the master culture, the slave and the slave. Do you not see that too?
I see that too. A question that's coming up for me is in terms of acknowledging how we've used the wound power when it comes to racial dynamics. Is there a degree that the people with the master archetype have to take more responsibility and take more of the blame?
This isn't about more. There you go with duality. This is about looking at, we drugged them. We wanted the black population drugged. We wanted them drugged. We prevented them from getting an education. We did not want them empowered. The crimes we perpetrated are so huge. It is not funny. How's that for a starter?
Yeah, I think that's where we need to start. Yeah.
That's the beginning.
Yeah, that's the beginning.
Okay. Okay, everybody. So, that's just the beginning. History is your teacher. Read history. Learn all the facts you can. I'm a history nut. Does it show? History is your guide. Okay, everybody. I have loaded you to the brim. You're loaded. I want you to have a lovely evening. There's a spa here. Go take a nap. Go take a walk. You're going to have a lovely evening. Meet in the bar. Go watch the election results. Meet me in the bar watching the election results. Jam a gin and tonic down me, but in the meantime, Close your eyes. Lord, let the grace of transformation roll into me. I need it. I need all the grace I can get. It is so challenging to open myself to change. There's nothing easy about it. There is nothing. And yet I feel this excitement in me. There's a possibility I could leave a different person than when I came in here. That there's a possibility that I might walk home into a different life. Because some part of me is throbbing and beating with very different truths. That you could reveal to me something I did not know about myself, because I am able to grasp that. So open me to that grace, Lord.